Yo guys, how is it going? And welcome back to the channel. And today is the very first episode and launch of my brand new podcast called The Mastercast. This is a podcast where we're going to be discussing a bunch of different topics, anything that we kind of want to talk about really, sort of just have fun on it. It's going to consist of long videos and short videos as well, and as you can see, this is a visual as well, so if you guys want to watch it as a video, or you can watch it as just like an audio for something in the background, it's completely up to you. But yeah, this is the launch of my new podcast, and if you've followed me for a while, you'll know that I've wanted to start this for the longest time now, and here we finally are. I just thought, let's get on with it. We wanna make the content, and like I said, I've been so excited to do this for so long. So here we finally are, and in this episode, for the first one, we're going to be talking about the Formula One 2022 season review, and it is long overdue because obviously now we're into car launch season for the 2023 season, and yeah, it's all getting a bit crazy. So thought this is a long overdue video, and it's definitely a good starting point for this podcast. So I hope you guys are excited. Make sure you leave a thumbs up if you are, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on any of these episodes and future videos that I also make as well. So without further ado guys, let's get into the podcast. So how we'll structure this episode is we will go driver by driver, team by team, and we're probably going to start at the back of the grid with Williams. So we'll start there. But just before we do get into that, then let's talk about 2022 and obviously the big regulation change, which was the major thing coming into this season. Obviously, the FIA brought this in to make the racing closer, which I think a lot of people were like, oh yeah, they said that, you know, the first year regulation's never going to really do much. And I was one of those people, to be honest. I think they were definitely overhyping it and making it more exciting than it actually was. But I have to say, for a first year and a first regulation change, I think they've done very, very well. And I think the racing was definitely closer, that's for sure. They definitely were able to, you know, follow closer and over a amount of laps, because you know, 2021 a driver would get close, overheat, had to back off and then go for it again, whereas 2022 they definitely seem more compact, especially on the trickier tracks like Singapore, Mexico, places like that. So that was really good to see, and really successful when, you know, this is the first year of it, so you know there's still more improvements to come obviously, but for a first year it wasn't too bad at all then. So let's start off with the first team, and like I said, that is Williams Racing, and they only managed to score 8 points as a team. Obviously helped out with De Vries's 2 points in Monza as well, but yeah, P10 in the constructors with 8 points. Like I said, helped out with De Vries, and Nicholas Latifi finished in P20, last of the permanent drivers that were on the grid, because obviously we had, like I said, De Vries and Hulkenberg. Only picked up 2 points, Latifi, and Albon finished in P19 with 4 points to his name. So we'll start with Latifi then, and yeah, Latifi was just a bit of a meme all season, wasn't he, really? I think what kind of knocked his confidence at the start of the season was all the crashes that he was having. For some reason, he just couldn't get to grips with the car, and I think that really hindered his confidence, because after that, after about Saudi and Australia, he just was pushing absolutely, well, he wasn't pushing, and unfortunately that was the outcome. If you don't push, then you don't get the results that you want. So I think he was just after that taking it really easy and just trying not to crash the car, and then unfortunately didn't really seem to pick up the confidence. Apart from that, obviously he had the points finish in Japan, but unfortunately, yeah, that wasn't, I think by then it was kind of a little bit too late. Well, quite a bit late, because you know, that was coming towards the end of the season, and he still had an embarrassing moment at that race as well, with obviously where he blamed it on the car when he went the wrong way around the circuit, which was probably the most stupidest highlight of his season, to be honest. And like I said, it was just a meme all season really, but it's a bit of a shame, because I do think Nicholas, when he first came into F1, was a good talent, and even in 2021, you know, he had some good results and picked up some points, but yeah, just this season just did not gel for him, and unfortunately he'll just have to go back eating Nutella, which is a meme that's going around. If you haven't seen it, it's quite funny, because I think Latifi in an interview said that he liked Nutella at one point, so I don't know why, but That's the joke if you don't know the reference. So yeah, unfortunately, Nicholas has lost his seat now, and I can imagine we'll be going on to do some other form of racing, whether it be Formula E. I could see him at Formula E, or maybe some sort of American NASCAR, IndyCar maybe. But we'll have to wait and see on that one. But yeah, I don't think that Nicholas is going to be particularly missed, unfortunately, for all you Canadian fans. So it's farewell to Latifi. Albon, on the other hand, had a bit of a more successful season. Obviously, his first season back in Formula 1 since he got dropped from Red Bull in 2020, and that sort of hard period and sort of reliving what Pierre Gasly went through. But Albon at Williams obviously only picked up 4 points, like I said, P19 above only Latifi, which isn't a massive, surprise, but he is in Williams and he is a good driver. I thought he had a great season, had a few Q2 appearances, and also I'm sure he had a few Q3 appearances as well. But yeah, just obviously wasn't able to quite convert that into anything else. But like I said, he is in a Williams, but it would be good to see him back in sort of an Alpine or something, just a little bit better than a Williams, because it is the worst car on the grid. But like I said, he did a good job, and he's obviously going against Logan Sargent next year, or this year, should I say. So yeah, looking forward to that, and hopefully that will be quite an interesting teammate rivalry, because Albon has been in the sport for a good few years now, so there's no excuse why he wouldn't be able to beat the new rookie coming into the sport. But yeah, definitely rate Albon's season quite highly, and hopefully he will get a better seat for the future. Next up, we'll talk about Guan Yu Zhou then, the only rookie on the 2022 grid, and obviously he joined Alfa Romeo alongside Bottas, who moved from Mercedes. So he was going up, I would say, against quite a fierce competitor. P18 for Guan Yu Zhou, like I said, picked up 6 points throughout the season. Valtteri Bottas also managed to get in the top 10. Like, that is crazy. He had such a good start to the season, Bottas. So P10 of 49 points for Valtteri Bottas. And in the constructors, they managed to get a total of a very respectable 55 points and joint 6th place with Aston Martin, where you could say Aston, that's pretty successful for them, because Aston Martin obviously were Racing Point and had a lot of success as Racing Point. But yeah, that's a really, really good job from Alfa Romeo. But Guan Yu Zhou, yeah, like I said, the only rookie on the grid, and I think he actually did quite a good job. He obviously didn't get, what he probably would have liked. He probably would have liked to get a few more points. But, like I said, considering you're going up against someone who's been in the top car for the last 4 or 5 years, that is pretty impressive. And, he was outshining Bottas quite a few times in the earlier races, sort of midway through as well, when Bottas wasn't really on form. So it was good to see Guan Yu Zhou, really giving it some as well. So really, really good to see, and hopefully we'll have a little bit more luck next year, or this year as well, because last season was just, he had such bad luck, and it was a real shame, because I definitely think he would have had more points on the board if it wasn't for that. But obviously another major talking point as well for Guan Yu Zhou's season is the crash he had in Silverstone, where he flipped over after George Russell made contact with Gasly, and they all kind of just went into each other. But yeah, thankfully he walked away from that crash, because honestly that was horrifying to witness. But yeah, not a graze on him, and luckily he was okay. So thank God for that. But yeah, apart from that, looking forward to see what he can do next year against Valtteri Bottas, especially now he's had a whole season, to settle in. So fingers crossed we can see Guan Yu Zhou do really, really well. So really looking forward to that. Like I said, Valtteri Bottas also, what a man. What a man. Obviously, like I said, the first sort of 4 or 5 races, he was on fire, qualifying really well, had a few top 5 and top 4 finishes. It was just unbelievable. And at one point, people were thinking if Mercedes had made the wrong decision, firing the wrong driver. It was crazy. So, like I said, 49 points for Valtteri Bottas. That is mental. And yeah, just a very, very, very solid job. I think the only disappointment for me is that he really dropped off, like I said, later on in the season, sort of midway through onwards. He definitely fell off, whether it was down to just him or the car just got a little bit worse over time, not too sure, or other teams just caught up. Yeah, it was a bit of a shame to see him drop off at such a after such a successful start. But nevertheless, really, really good job from Valtteri Bottas. And like I said, I think Alfa Romeo should be very happy that they managed to secure 55 points in the Constructors, and alongside Aston Martin as well. That's a really, really, really good job from them. So next up is AlphaTauri. AlphaTauri. What a shocking season that has been. They've probably got to be the most upsetting, or the most disappointed team. The most shock, maybe. 35 points in the Constructors, 9th place. Yuki Tsunoda 17th with 12 points, equaling Mick Schumacher of 16th. So joint 16th with Mick Schumacher. And then Gasly only managing 14th with 23 points, which, again, yeah, like I said, I think they are probably the most disappointing team of the season. Just were nowhere. They didn't have any standout performances, and it was a real shock as well, because obviously, you know, we came into a new regulation change, but in 2021 and 2020, they looked quick. So it was a massive shame to see them do so poorly. And, you know, Tsunoda, I think, is a great driver. And obviously he had his first season in 2021 as well to get used to the car. So it wasn't like he wasn't used to things. And I mean, Gasly's been in the sport for a few years now as well. So it was very disappointing. And definitely, hopefully, they'll be able to be a bit faster next season. But yeah, Tsunoda was still a little bit crash happy as well this season. And he kind of needs to stop that, because Red Bull, as we know, don't really like that. But they seem to be sort of going away from the Red Bull Academy now side of things, the Red Bull program. They seem to just be kind of grabbing whoever they want, basically. So, but he still has to stop crashing, because that's not obviously going to get you anywhere in the sport. And yeah, Gasly as well, I just don't know what to say about them. They were just absolutely nowhere. And yeah, it's a real shame to see. But hopefully 2023, new car, new year, you never know. So fingers crossed they'll be able to come back a little bit stronger. Next up is Haas. And I think this is probably going to be the biggest shock in terms of progression for a team. So obviously Mick Schumacher and Kevin Magnussen bought in for replacement of Nikita Mazepin after he got dropped after the whole Russian scandal and all the war that was going on, well, still going on to this day. So Haas P8, 37 points in the Constructors as a team, which is a massive improvement considering they scored nothing in 2021. The regulation change was a well-needed thing for Haas, and obviously they sacrificed the whole off 2021 to build this car, so it definitely worked out for them. But unfortunately, Mick has obviously lost his seat now. 16th place in the drivers championship with 12 points on the board as well. So yeah, it was a bit of an improvement for Mick, and obviously, you know, got some points on the board compared to last season. But considering, you know, once again, he had used to get to the sport and get used to the car. I know it's a completely different car, but you know, you settled into a team. He just was a little bit too crash happy, and he did cost the team a lot. I think up until Monaco, he cost the team like £2 million in just repairs alone, and Haas are a team that cannot afford that. So I think that was one of the main reasons why they dropped him. But apart from that, he had a pretty successful season, had some pretty good results and some really good battles on track as well. I think Austria is one of his highlights of the season, where he just shone and had a really, really good one. Kevin Magnussen as well, though, what a comeback. Obviously, he took a year off and then got literally called up with Gunther Steiner, didn't even take part in the testing in Barcelona, and just rocked up and did a fantastic job. In the first race, obviously got P5 in Bahrain, which was an absolute masterclass from Haas, and obviously got the pole position in Brazil as well, which is still a massive highlight, probably the highlight of the season, I'd say. So absolutely mental. So yeah, 25 points for Magnussen in the Drivers' Championship with 13th place. So yeah, very good job from Haas. But yeah, it'll be good to see, you know, with Hülkenberg coming back as well. Obviously, the history between Hülkenberg and Magnussen as well, that's going to be really interesting to see. But yeah, in terms of Haas this season, a very successful turnaround, but I definitely think they can do better, and I think they'll be looking for more in 2023. Next up is Aston Martin, and they're a hard one to sort of talk about, really, because obviously Lance Stroll, as we know, Lawrence Stroll is the owner of the team, and it's a hard one to talk about sometimes because, you know, no matter what, he's kind of safe in that team because his dad is the owner. So it's very hard to talk about Stroll sometimes. But as a season, he didn't do too badly. He had a few silly mistakes, as Stroll does. But on the most part, he had a lot of these like shocking results. If you see my race reactions, I was always like, how did Stroll end up in the points? Like, Vettel was miles ahead, and all of a sudden, at the end of the race, he just managed to get ahead of him and score a point somehow. So, 15th place for Stroll and 18 points on the board. Sebastian Vettel P12 and 37 points on the board. So, that was, well, that's the experience in Vettel coming out there. And then in the Constructors, like I mentioned, there were joint P6 with Alfa Romeo, but I definitely think Aston Martin will be disappointed with that. Like I said, after all the success they had with Racing Point, they definitely, I feel, will be wanting more this season. But nevertheless, Vettel, obviously as well, leaving the sport, he's going to be truly missed after such great success in the sport and after such a long run as well. I think 2008 he joined. So yeah, it's going to feel weird, I think, without Sebastian, but fingers crossed he'll come back at some point, even if it's, you know, behind the scenes or an FIA steward, because I've seen a few people say he'll suit that kind of role. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, Vettel, it was very sad to see him go. And yeah, we'll get back to talking about Stroll though, because he's the main one that we are going to focus on here, because like I said, he's dad's the owner of the team, and that's all fine. Well, it's not fine, but yeah, you know, it is what it is. But yeah, he was very crash happy at the start of the season, and he really struggles to look in his mirrors half the time. And the amount of times he did that was quite annoying and quite frustrating for me personally. But yeah, Stroll just needs to minimize the mistakes a little bit and hopefully go better in 2023, because yeah, he is a little bit too crash happy sometimes, and he just has no personality as well. I think that's the problem with Stroll. He's quite unlikable because he knows, I feel like, well, obviously he knows that his dad's the owner, so no matter what, he's going to be safe in that team. And I feel like his personality and his body language always says that, so it's kind of hard to like Stroll sometimes. But nevertheless, a pretty good season. But I definitely think, like I said, Aston Martin can take a step forward and do better in 2023. So fingers crossed that will happen. But like I said, it's going to be a real shame not to see Vettel on the grid in 2023, because the guy was so lovable, such a good personality, and he was the guy I used to hate back in the day when, you know, Lewis and him were at Ferrari. When he was at Ferrari and Lewis was at Mercedes, just having the good old championship fight. But yeah, it's going to be sad without him, but hopefully he'll come back at some point. Next up is McLaren. We'll move on to McLaren then, and Daniel Ricciardo, P11, with, well, surprisingly 37 points, and Lando Norris in P7 on 122. Like, that is just ridiculous, the point difference there. And in the Constructors, they managed to get 5th place, 159 points, just missing out on Alpine. But yeah, McLaren, like I said, a very different two halves of a season. You had Daniel Ricciardo, the guy who was struggling, threatening to lose his seat, which he eventually did. And now he's no longer in the sport either. Obviously now a reserve driver at Red Bull, which is very interesting. And a lot of people are saying, is he going to potentially take Perez's seat after, obviously, you know, all the controversy that the Red Bull guys went through, you know, last season? We'll have to wait and see on that one. But from a McLaren's point of view, it was horrible. So many Q1 appearances, and it was just horrible to see. And, you know, I really rate Daniel Ricciardo, and my dad's even said he's never really rated Ricciardo, and I disagree. I thought back in the Red Bull days he was a really, really good driver, and on his day he was hard to beat. And when, you know, Verstappen came in, it kind of got a little bit sour, and then he kind of got unfairly treated. So that you can't. I don't feel like you could really see Daniel's obviously full potential, because he had like 8 DNFs in like half a season. But yeah, just this season was just not the one. I just really struggled with the car every single weekend, week in, week out. He was just nowhere on Lando's pace. I think the only time I recall was Mexico, when he got that points paying position and was just chucked on a set of softs and flew through the grid. But apart from that, there hasn't really been anything else that stood out to me. So yeah, it's a massive shame, because like I said, I really rate Daniel Ricciardo. And it's a big shame that we're going to lose him, but hopefully he'll come back at some point, maybe take a year off. And I'm not even sure where he would go, to be honest, but like I said, maybe that Red Bull seat will become available. We'll have to wait and see on that one. But Lando Norris, though, obviously, being British myself, I absolutely love the guy, and Daniel Ricciardo as well. You know, he's like one of the most lovable guys on the grid, because he's just so bubbly and always smiling. But Lando Norris, P7, like I said, and 122 points. Just the guy is a really, really good driver. And I really hope that in a few, well, maybe even next season, I think his McLaren contract's up next season. He does deserve a better drive. And I think him and George alongside each other at Mercedes would be good, but also would be quite toxic, I think, as well. I think that, I don't know, I could just see that boiling over a little bit, but yeah, had some really good results. The only driver as well who managed to get a podium who wasn't a Mercedes, Ferrari or a Red Bull driver, which is still just mental, especially after 2021, you know, when we had all those midfield podium finishes. It was just crazy. So that just highlights what a great success that Lando Norris is having at McLaren. But yeah, just deserves, I think, a little bit more, and hopefully we'll get a better drive in a few years to come, hopefully. Now, we're going to talk about Alpine. Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso. This was quite a toxic relationship, wasn't it, this season? Ocon managed to finish ahead of Alonso by 11 points. Ocon on 92 points and Alonso in 9th on 81 points. They managed to, like I said, finish ahead of McLaren in 4th place in the Constructors on 173 points. But I definitely think they could have done a lot more. But Alonso is just Alonso, isn't he? I actually love the guy, and obviously he's going to Aston Martin this season, sorry. I keep saying that. I feel like I'm talking about as we're still in last year, but yeah, he's going to Aston Martin, which I think is a very odd career move, but, you know, Alonso is known for making rash and weird and silly moves, and I think this is also another one, really. P9, like I said, in the drivers, and yeah, just has had a good season, but also Alpine just had too much unreliability, and that was, I think, the downfall of their season, really. But obviously he nearly got that pole in Australia where his hydraulics failed, I think, and he crashed into the wall, which I think was just so devastating. And then obviously he had the front row start in Canada as well, which was just amazing. So yeah, it was quite a highlight for Alonso, I think, in that part of the season, but definitely think I felt deserved more. But like I said, if it wasn't for the unreliability at the end of the season, he probably would have been able to do a little bit more. But I'm not really even sure why they had so much toxic, like, what's the one I'm looking for? There was just a lot of bad blood between them, and I don't even really know why. But yeah, just it got to the point where it was just ridiculous. You know, I think in Brazil, Alonso said in an interview, it's like nearly over with Ocon and stuff. It was just mental, and I still have no idea why it really got to that point, to be honest. But like I said, Alpine definitely deserve this, because they even with the unreliability at the end of the season, they definitely deserved the points, because, you know, they still managed to finish ahead of McLaren. And if it wasn't for Daniel Ricciardo, maybe that would have been a different story. But nevertheless, it has been quite a roller coaster for those guys. Now, next up is Ocon. We'll talk about Ocon first, actually. Ocon had a really good season. I think Ocon was probably driver of the season, to be honest. I definitely think the most underrated driver of the whole season as well. Just so many good finishes, and is a really, really good driver. Really nice guy as well. And I think with Gasly coming to that team as well, apparently those two don't get on either. So it's going to be another difficult relationship between Ocon and Gasly maybe. But as a leader, I think Ocon could actually really lead that team really well. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But from his season, yeah, really, really good job. Obviously, he had that standout performance in Belgium, where I think he made 2 double overtakes in one race. It was something crazy like that. But he is also a really consistent driver as well. I think that's what I really like about Ocon. And like I said, he's a really nice guy as well, which is also really helps. I know nice guys don't win races and nice guys don't always deserve to be in F1, but he's got the talent and he's also a nice guy. So I think that also really helps his case. Next up then, we'll talk about Mercedes. Probably the one that you guys have all been waiting for, because as you know, I am a Mercedes fan, and I said AlphaTauri were probably the shock of the year. I think maybe Mercedes were, because I think, you know, Lewis at the beginning of the season always said, oh yeah, we're going to be slow, blah, 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 which is obviously, you know, what they always say. But it actually happened this time. They actually weren't the fastest team, and they really struggled for the first half of the season. I mean, it's quite ironic that we're saying they had a bad season when they scored third in the Constructors and 515 points, but you get my point. You know, after all the success they've had over the last 8 years, and to become this bad, you know, so soon, that just proves what regulation changes can do. And Mercedes have got it so right so often. You know, they went through sort of 2 massive regulation changes and they got it spot on. So, but you know, not all teams can always be successful, so it's a bit of a shame. But yeah, like I said, 515 points, third in the Constructors. Lewis Hamilton in P6 in the Drivers, 240 points, which I think is his worst for a very, very long time. Can't remember the exact stat off my head, but I definitely saw that it's one of his worst in a long, long time. And George Russell, P4 with 275, which is quite a lot considering, you know, he's up against the 7-time world champion, and obviously it was George's first time at Mercedes as well. But we'll start with Lewis Hamilton, because he had a very difficult start to the season, and it was evident, really. You know, I feel like you could say, oh, you know, Lewis has been in the sport long enough, he's had all the success, you know, but I feel like it's hard going from having the best car for, you know, so many years to having not such a good car and getting used to it. Whereas George, on the other hand, was obviously in the worst car for the last 2 or 3 years, and then has gone into a better one and has just maybe adapted to it because it's a little bit better than what he used to drive. Whereas Lewis, it's a little bit different. So it's a hard one. It is a hard one. But yeah, Lewis it was definitely not the Lewis that we've seen in the last 8 years, or even longer, maybe. But yeah, obviously had the most shocking result at the start of the season in Saudi, where he qualified he got out-qualified by Stroll and got knocked out in Q1, which was just absolutely mental. I could not believe that when I saw my eyes. I didn't know what to say. I honestly didn't know what to say. So yeah, absolutely mental for Lewis. But yeah, he definitely picked up the momentum as the season went on, got a load of podiums, but yeah, just wasn't quite able to get that race win, and it was a big shame. And you know, Silverstone looked like it was going to be the race that it happened, but it wasn't. And then obviously in Brazil, it also wasn't quite what it was meant to be, because I think it might have happened maybe if Verstappen didn't make contact with him, but we'll have to wait. We will never know on that one. But hopefully this season, Mercedes have a better car and will be able to challenge the likes of Red Bull and Ferrari more this season. But I literally cannot wait for the new season to start. Whereas on the other hand, though, Russell, like I said, first year at Mercedes, very, very successful season, I would say, considering, like I said, you're up against the 7-time world champion who's had the most amount of success ever in Formula 1 as a Formula 1 driver, the most race wins, the most poles, the most, equal world championships with Michael Schumacher. It's just mental. But yeah, George Russell, like I said, definitely deserves all the praise that he's getting, and definitely had a really good season. Obviously got the 1 win as well in Brazil, which was just a fantastic drive. And yeah, I definitely think he could maybe potentially even be, the one that does make Lewis retire. Well, obviously he will, because I don't think Russell will still be there when Lewis retires, but I thought, it might happen. Last season, I wasn't sure if Lewis was going to continue, but he is. So fair play to Lewis. But yeah, Russell, a great season, and definitely think he'll be able to take this into the future, and will be able to progress with what he's managed to achieve this season. So it's really, really good. Now we're going to talk about Ferrari. Ferrari. Where do I even begin with Ferrari? Mattia Binotto, obviously now no longer at Ferrari for probably this reason. 554 points for Ferrari in the constructors, and Carlos Sainz in 5th place on 246 points, and Charles Leclerc 308 points and 2nd in the drivers' standings. So obviously we're going to talk about the highs and lows of Ferrari. Obviously, they had such a fantastic start to the season up until Australia. Leclerc, first of all, they got the 1-2 in Bahrain after Red Bulls both retired, which I still loved that moment. When I made the race reaction, I was just like karma everywhere after the 2021 Abu Dhabi situation. But yeah, 1 and 2 for Ferrari at Bahrain. Then they had... they lost out to Verstappen in Saudi, but then Leclerc got the win again. And you're thinking, wow, this could be Ferrari's season, but then it just went downhill. Not just with Ferrari strategy, not just with bad calls and silliness. It was just the unreliability as well. The reliability was shocking. And, for a while, people were thinking Red Bull were going to be the ones struggling with reliability, because obviously they both DNF'd in Bahrain, and then Verstappen DNF'd in Australia, and then he was down in like P6 in the drivers at some point. But yeah, what success Leclerc had at the start of the season. But yeah, just wasn't able to turn it around, unfortunately, and then it just got a little bit sour between Mattia Binotto and everyone else, and then it just kind of they kept making silly decisions, like Hungary, for example, with the hard tyre strategy. Like, what were they thinking? Even Pirelli, I think, came out and said the hard tyre should not be used in the race. And what do Ferrari go and do? They go and put the hard tyre on. Obviously, Leclerc is also not blameless. He also made a load of mistakes throughout the entire year. The ones that stick in my mind it's France. I think that was probably the defining moment where the championship was over. France, where he binned it into the wall. Imola, where he binned it in the wall but managed to continue on. And then Hungary as well, like I said, also was a big highlight for them as well, in terms of not doing well. Obviously Silverstone as well, that weird decision that they made to pit Sainz first. Obviously Sainz did get his first win this season, which was good for him. I was very happy for him. But yeah, the fact that Ferrari still made that decision was just bizarre. Then you had all the unreliability in Spain, Baku. It was just absolutely mental, and I don't think Ferrari's season could have gone much worse, to be honest. So yeah, fingers crossed they will have just as a successful car. But you never know with this. A new year can also change so quickly, like we've seen with Mercedes. But yeah, definitely a change was needed, I think, because even Binotto just didn't have the enthusiasm, or it just didn't look like he cared. Like, every time, he was talking to Sky Sports and they were talking about one of the mistakes that the Ferrari made, it was always just kind of, oh yeah, we did some mistakes, and he always just sort of brushed it off. And that's my brilliant Binotto impression, by the way. But yeah, nevertheless, like I said, it was a definite needed change, I think, because if you don't have someone there that's enthusiastic about their job and not seeing the mistakes, then you're never going to be able to get past the mistakes. So it was definitely a well-needed change, I think. And Sainz, like I said, obviously got his first win of the season, which was great for him. And yeah, really, really good to see. But again, also had a bit of a tricky season when I made also a few mistakes, but also got affected by the reliability of the car, which obviously, if you don't finish races, you don't score points. And that's exactly what happened to Carlos Sainz. So yeah, fingers crossed he'll bounce back for 2023, and I'm sure he will. I do really rate Sainz as a driver, and I think he's a very, very, very good talent. So yeah, hopefully we'll see more of him in 2023 and more success between the Ferrari boys, and hopefully we'll have a really good three-way fight for the championship, because it was exciting, especially for the first 3 races, you know, with that massive battling that was going on between Leclerc and Verstappen. We need that between all 6 cars at the front of the field, and even maybe more if McLaren and Alpine want to get involved as well. So let's make that happen. And finally, we'll move on to Red Bull and the massive success they've had this season. A record-breaking 14 wins, I think, in a season for Verstappen, which is, I hate to mention it, but the guy is talented. He is a great driver, and you can't knock that. 759 points in the constructors for Red Bull, and Verstappen finishing on 454 points. Like, it's absolutely mental. Finished over 100 points of second place. Like, it's absolutely mental. And Sergio Perez in P3 on 305. Wow, that is quite a stat. And like I said, despite, you know, the regulation changes and stuff, you know, Red Bull have really given it some, and it's really good to see. And I think Perez has definitely stepped up this season as well. Obviously, he was taken on from Red Bull, and I think he had a bit of a shaky 2021, but this season I definitely think he's progressed and got a lot better. And like I mentioned earlier, in Brazil, it definitely got a bit heated with the situation between him and Verstappen. So, and the whole Ricardo Red Bull thing, I don't think it's true, but it is a little bit suspicious. They were reading off statistics, and it's like, that's very interesting. But it will be interesting to see if Perez does abide Verstappen's orders and stuff. If Red Bull tell him to move out of the way, I think that's going to be really interesting to see. I think he probably will, because, you know, Verstappen is the fan favourite and the number 1 in the team. But I don't know. I just think that could be quite interesting. But in terms of 2022, he definitely did a very good job. Perez had a really good standout moments, like the pole position in Saudi Arabia, got his second win in Formula 1 in Singapore. I think it was his second, but he got the win in Singapore and also the pole, I believe. So yeah, very good job from Perez, but hopefully we'll be able to bring it to Verstappen a bit more, and maybe be in the title fight a bit more as well. You never know. But then Max Verstappen, like I mentioned as well, has probably had one of the most successful seasons of any driver. Like I said, a record-breaking 14 wins, I think, in a season. Over 100 points of Charles Leclerc, and the guy was just unstoppable. Every single race, it felt like Verstappen was winning, even if it was a Ferrari or someone else, you know. And that just proves how much success they've had. But for me, obviously, you know, I'm not massively a Red Bull fan. I'm not a Verstappen fan, but it just leaves a sour taste in my mouth after, you know, Abu Dhabi 2021. I don't want to bring it up, but it's hard to, you know, talk about a driver with all the success they have had and stuff when the rules and regulations get broken, and then they wonder why they have the fastest car and stuff. I know this is probably going to be a bit controversial, but, you know, I want to be controversial because it's a controversial sport. You know, you can't always be happy, clappy, clappy. But to me, Verstappen is a good driver, don't get me wrong, but he is surrounded by arrogant people, and just, I feel like he hasn't deserved any of the championships that he's won yet because of the regulations that they broke. And people will probably say, oh, we only broke it in 2021, but how do we not know that that's carried over into 2022 as well to make the car so successful? You know, it's just all these things that are going through my head. I'm not taking anything away from Verstappen's season, but just the fact that, you know, he's been through that, and Red Bull, you know, have broken rules. It's kind of a bit like, well, I don't really know if I can support that, really. So that's how I look at it. But what can I do? You know, he's a 2-time world champion. That's not going to change now. So we just have to look forward to the future, and hopefully we'll have a more fairer competitive field. And as long as it's competitive, that's all we care about, because, you know, it makes the sport fair and fun for everybody. So There we go. So there we go, guys. That is my highlights of the 2022 season for all the drivers and teams. So we're now going to talk about some highlights of the season that I really enjoyed and just do an overview of 2022. So first, start off with a really good highlight I enjoyed, which was the overtake that Hamilton did on Perez and Leclerc at the British Grand Prix, where Crofty goes, and through goes Hamilton. That is literally, I think, the highlight of the entire season for me personally, because obviously Lewis Hamilton fan, but it was just so iconic, and the fact that it happened at the British Grand Prix as well, I think just made it 10 times better as well. So yeah, really enjoyed that moment. My next moment I want to announce is Nick de Vries's points finish at Monza. I think was such a wholesome story. Obviously, Albon had the problem in, for that weekend, so he had to have surgery, I think, and had to miss the race, and then de Vries stepped in. Obviously, had a few, times at other teams as well, which probably helped him maybe get used to how the car felt and stuff, but still, it's, a complete different team, rushed in at last minute, and to get those points and just to absolutely shit on Latifi season like that must have been absolutely devastating for Nicholas Latifi. But yeah, that was another highlight of mine that I really enjoyed throughout the season. Another one I really enjoyed was the controversial moment in Monaco with Perez spinning just before the tunnel. I really still don't know how to look at this. It looks like, from the telemetry, it looks like he did just, spin up the rears and spun on purpose. But to me, I don't feel like he would do that unless he was on pole position, and he wasn't. Nevertheless, though, he still obviously, ruined Verstappen's lap, and maybe that's just Verstappen being spoiled brat, which he is technically, but it was still quite a controversial highlight moment. Obviously, that caused the beef in Brazil and that whole controversial moment on the team radio as well. So that was another highlight for me that I wanted to mention as well. So there we go, guys. That is probably going to be it for the first episode of the podcast. Sorry if it was a little bit amateur, but like I said, I'm trying to get used to this whole sort of concept and talking for this long as well. But like I said, hopefully we can continue this podcast if you have enjoyed this episode. And I don't believe I mentioned it at the beginning, but if you did want to get involved on this podcast as well, we can talk about anything that you want. We'll have a conversation, get in touch with me on my socials. I'll be happy to talk to anybody. And let's have a bash. Let's see where it goes, and who knows, we'll maybe create a whole list of people that want to join, and we can have someone on the podcast each episode. That would be actually really fun, so let's do that. Nevertheless, guys, if you have enjoyed this episode, like I said, please do give it a thumbs up. Make sure you are subscribed so you never miss out on any future videos or podcasts to come in the future. So make sure you do that. Turn on bell notifications as well, and I will see you all again in the next one for another episode of the Mastercast. Take care.
Never break, always fight, never quit, do it right, play the game, win it life, have no shame, there's no time, feel the pain, live the grind.